It was never a friendship. It was never even a stable alliance. It was a relationship built in crisis, sharpened by betrayal, renewed by war, and kept alive by geography. Pakistan and the United States kept finding each other at the worst possible moments, and every time they did, each side believed it was using the other for a larger purpose. That is what makes the story so compelling. The partnership kept surviving even when trust did not. What follows is not the history of two countries that learned to understand one another. It is the history of two states that kept discovering they could not fully escape one another. Pakistan and the United States never became natural allies. They became necessary allies at particular moments, for particular reasons, and then spent the years afterward arguing about what those reasons had really meant. One side usually believed it was making a hard strategic bargain in a dangerous world. The other usually believed it was using a regional partner to solve a larger problem somewhere else. Between those two beliefs, a relationship took shape that has lasted since the birth of Pakistan in 1947 and yet has rarely felt settled, affectionate, or morally clean. It has survived wars, coups, sanctions, secret deals, intelligence cooperation, public humiliation, nuclear anxiety, jihad, drones, and the kind of mistrust that would have broken a more sentimental partnership long ago. That is why the story is not best told as a friendship, and not even simply as an alliance. It is better understood as an alliance of convenience, renewed by crisis, weakened by memory, and kept alive by geography. The story begins not with Washington but with partition. Pakistan entered the world in August 1947 carrying the wounds of mass migration, communal slaughter, administrative improvisation, and immediate insecurity. The state did not inherit the calm privilege of choosing its place in the world at leisure. It inherited refugees, disputed assets, weak institutions, a contested border with India, and the knowledge that survival itself was political. In those first years, Pakistani leaders looked outward not because they were ideologically destined for one camp or another, but because they needed resources, diplomatic weight, and military reassurance. The Kashmir dispute had already cast a long shadow over the new state. India was larger, better resourced, and in the eyes of many Pakistani officials the central strategic factor around which every other question would have to turn. If Pakistan sought great power support, it did so from the beginning through the lens of asymmetry. The United States, for its part, did not immediately fall in love with Pakistan or fully understand what Pakistan wanted. Early American officials recognized the strategic importance of the new state, but they were also wary of being drawn too deeply into South Asia's rivalries. In the first years after independence, Washington still hoped to balance its relations with both India and Pakistan while building a larger post-war order in Asia. The problem was that balance looked different from each side of the relationship. Pakistani leaders wanted acknowledgement that their security fears were real and urgent. American policymakers often viewed those fears through broader strategic calculations about Soviet influence, regional stability, and the management of decolonization. The tension was present from the start. Pakistan wanted a patron who would take India seriously. The United States wanted a partner who would fit into a larger global architecture it was building against communism. That architecture would define the first great phase of the relationship. As the Cold War hardened in the late 1940s and early 1950s, Washington became increasingly interested in states that could anchor a chain of containment across Eurasia. Pakistan, with its geography, its military tradition, and its leadership's willingness to align more clearly with the Western Bloc than India was willing to do, began to look useful. Pakistani leaders, meanwhile, saw opportunity in American anxiety. If the United States needed dependable anti-communist partners, Pakistan could present itself as disciplined, strategically located, and politically available. But even here the seeds of later disappointment were planted. Pakistan understood alignment as a route to stronger security guarantees in a hostile neighborhood. The United States understood alignment as participation in a global struggle in which South Asia was important largely because it connected to larger theaters. Each side thought it was entering a hard-headed bargain. Each side also assumed the other would eventually recognize its own priorities as the more compelling ones. That mutual misreading would become the deepest pattern in the history that followed. But that was only the opening bargain, not the real test. In the early 1950s, Pakistan's search for security found its first durable American shape. Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan's 1950 visit to the United States signaled that Pakistan was prepared to cultivate Washington more actively than New Delhi was prepared to do. India under Jawaharlal Nehru was already moving toward a posture of non-alignment, and while American officials did not relish losing influence in India, they also noticed that Pakistan was more willing to speak the language of strategic partnership. Pakistani officials, facing military weakness and persistent anxiety over Kashmir, noticed something equally important: anti-communism had become a currency in Washington, and Pakistan was prepared to spend it if it brought material returns. This convergence matured into formal arrangements in the middle of the decade. Pakistan joined the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization in 1954 and the Baghdad Pact, later CENTO, in 1955. On paper, these alignments placed Pakistan inside a Western security network stretching through the Middle East and Asia. In practice, they carried different meanings for each side. For the United States, Pakistan helped fill out the strategic map of containment. For Pakistan, the alliances seemed to promise military aid, diplomatic stature, and a closer link between American power and Pakistani insecurity. The logic was clear enough to policymakers in Karachi: if Pakistan became useful to the United States in the Cold War, the United States would have stronger reasons to keep Pakistan strong against India. Arms and aid followed. American military assistance improved Pakistan's armed forces, strengthened its officer corps, and created habits of institutional familiarity that would outlast political cycles. Pakistani officers trained with American equipment and absorbed American doctrines. Bureaucratic relationships thickened. The armed forces became not only recipients of hardware but interpreters of the US connection. Yet this very success deepened the relationship's central ambiguity. American aid was justified publicly through the language of anti-communism, but much of its practical meaning in Pakistan was tied to the balance with India. Washington knew this, but preferred not to dwell on it. Pakistan knew Washington knew this, and chose to believe that formal silence did not negate practical understanding. Both sides were learning to live inside a strategic fiction. That fiction mattered because it allowed cooperation to advance without confronting the question that would haunt the relationship for decades: what exactly would the United States do when Pakistan's anti-communist usefulness collided with Pakistan's obsession with India? As long as the question remained theoretical, the alliance could look stronger than it was. But alliances built on differently imagined wars are always waiting for the first real test. And this is where the relationship started revealing what it really was. The next turn in the story came when crisis forced both countries to reveal what they actually expected from one another. By the late 1950s, Pakistan had also entered a different internal phase, and the American relationship moved with it. In 1958, General Ayub Khan seized power in Pakistan's first military coup, inaugurating a pattern in which the United States often found itself working most closely not with Pakistani democracy but with Pakistani military rule. Ayub presented himself as modernizing, disciplined, pragmatic, and immune to the instability of parliamentary politics. To Washington, that made him legible. He could deliver policy, maintain order, and speak the language of strategic seriousness. In a Cold War environment that often rewarded control over representation, military government did not necessarily look like a barrier to partnership. Ayub's Pakistan became in some respects the model version of the alliance. American aid flowed. Military ties deepened. Pakistan granted the United States access to intelligence facilities, including the famous U-2 related listening post at Badaba near Peshawar. The secretive side of the relationship expanded alongside the public one. Pakistan offered geography, the United States offered resources and attention. To Pakistani leaders, this was the bargain functioning as intended. To American strategists, Pakistan was becoming a reliable piece of the Cold War structure in a region where India's non-alignment continued to frustrate hopes of a cleaner partnership. And yet the very intelligence cooperation that seemed to prove the alliance's depth also revealed its limits. When Francis Gary Powers' U-2 aircraft was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960 after taking off from Pakistan, the incident exposed how thoroughly Pakistan had embedded itself in an American confrontation not of its own making. Pakistan had gained status by becoming useful. It had also made itself vulnerable by tying part of its value to activities that could bring Soviet retaliation. This was a recurring danger in the alliance of convenience. Pakistan often gained short-term relevance by lending itself to larger American contests, but the risks of those contests did not remain abstract once Pakistan's territory and institutions became part of them. What came next changed the meaning of the alliance entirely. Ayub understood that dependence on Washington could not entirely define Pakistan's future. He sought room for maneuver, contact with China, and leverage against India. Even in one of the relationship's warmer phases, Pakistan was not trying to become an obedient satellite. It was trying to extract security from a superpower while preserving enough autonomy to avoid disappearing inside its patron's map. That balancing act would shape every major phase that followed. Seen from a distance, the alliance seems to move in chapters. Lived from within, it felt more like recurring weather. The first major rupture came when theory met war. In 1965, Pakistan and India fought a major conflict over Kashmir. For Pakistani decision-makers, this was the moment when the practical meaning of years of alignment with the United States should have become clear. If Pakistan had stood with Washington in the Cold War, if it had joined the pacts, if it had accepted the burdens of strategic usefulness, then surely the United States would now understand that Pakistani security against India was not some local distraction but the very heart of the matter. Washington saw it differently. The Johnson administration, unwilling to be dragged into a war between two states it wanted to keep from wider escalation, imposed an arms embargo on both India and Pakistan. In formal terms, the policy looked even-handed. In psychological terms, especially from Pakistan's point of view, it was devastating. Pakistan had entered alliance structures expecting differential treatment. Instead, at the first great military test involving India, the United States behaved like a power managing regional stability rather than honoring Pakistan's hierarchy of fears. The embargo did not merely reduce supply. It punctured an assumption. The real damage, though, was only beginning to show. From then on, the story Pakistan told itself about America became darker and more complicated. The United States might still be useful. It might still provide aid, technology, diplomatic attention, and military links. But in moments of direct confrontation with India, Washington's preferences did not automatically line up with Pakistan's. This lesson did not drive Pakistan away from the United States immediately. It did something more important. It introduced mistrust into the alliance at the strategic level. Pakistani elites increasingly understood that America wanted Pakistan for reasons larger than Pakistan itself. When the priorities diverged, the larger reasons would win. This is why 1965 matters so much in the long arc of the relationship. It was the point at which the alliance of convenience stopped looking like a misunderstood friendship and started looking like exactly what it was, a partnership in which utility could be real and disappointment could be guaranteed. Pakistan did not stop dealing with Washington after that lesson. It learned to deal with Washington while remembering it. What came next did not overturn the old pattern so much as harden it. The next great shock came in 1971, and it changed everything about how Pakistan understood vulnerability. The crisis began in East Pakistan, where the electoral victory of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the refusal of West Pakistani elites to transfer power led to a brutal state crackdown, a refugee catastrophe, civil war, and eventually Indian military intervention. By December 1971, Pakistan suffered military defeat and lost its eastern wing, which became Bangladesh. No event did more to reveal the fragility of the Pakistani state and the limits of American support. This is the moment where convenience started to look like dependence. The Nixon administration was, in private, more sympathetic to Pakistan than many of its critics then or now fully acknowledge. Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger valued Pakistan partly because Islamabad was helping facilitate the secret US opening to China, one of the great strategic realignments of the 20th century. Yahya Khan's regime became a crucial diplomatic channel in the triangular diplomacy connecting Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. In that sense, Pakistan's usefulness to the United States had rarely been greater. But usefulness does not always translate into salvation. Even as Nixon tilted rhetorically toward Pakistan during the 1971 war, the United States did not prevent India's military success or the breakup of Pakistan. This split between intimacy and powerlessness is central to the documentary story. Pakistan mattered enough to help change the global balance through the U.S. China opening, yet not enough to stop its own territorial dismemberment. For many Pakistanis, the lesson was brutal. America could value Pakistan highly and still fail to protect it at the moment that mattered most. The alliance of convenience could generate privileged access, flattering words, secret missions, and strategic importance, but none of that guaranteed rescue when history turned violent in South Asia itself. Out of the trauma of 1971 emerged a deeper conviction inside Pakistan's ruling elite that reliance on external promises was never enough. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto would later express this not only in foreign policy but in nuclear ambition. If Pakistan was to survive in a region dominated by India, it would need an ultimate guarantee of its own. The long road to the bomb cannot be understood apart from 1971 and from the accumulated suspicion that great power ties, however useful, remained conditional and therefore unreliable. If the first phase of the relationship was shaped by insecurity, the next was shaped by memory and asymmetry. And then the relationship entered its most dangerous phase. The 1970s were years of reorientation. Bhutto came to power determined to rebuild Pakistan's shattered confidence and reduce the sense that the state's fate could be decided by others. He combined populist rhetoric, Islamic diplomacy, strategic ambition, and a determination that Pakistan would not remain permanently vulnerable. The nuclear program advanced in this period not as a symbolic luxury but as a project rooted in trauma, prestige, and deterrence. If the United States had shown that it would not always stand between Pakistan and its enemies, then Pakistan would seek capabilities that made such mediation less central. This immediately complicated relations with Washington. American policymakers were capable of understanding Pakistan's security fears, but they also feared the spread of nuclear weapons. The very state they had once armed as an anti-communist partner was now moving toward a capability the United States regarded as dangerous. Once again the alliance's two logics collided. Pakistan read the nuclear project through the lens of India, 1971, and survival. The United States read it through non-proliferation, regional instability, and the nightmare of uncontrolled escalation in South Asia. The Pakistani side never saw this as an abstract legal issue. It saw a pattern. Each time Islamabad adjusted to the hard realities of its own neighborhood, Washington responded through the priorities of a larger global system. Pakistan's rulers increasingly believed that American advice was easy to give because America did not share Pakistan's geography. Washington could urge restraint because Washington was not squeezed between India, Afghanistan, and the fear of internal fracture. This difference in lived strategic environment kept turning cooperation into argument. Still, the relationship did not break completely. Too many channels already existed. Military habits, diplomatic memory, and the simple fact of Pakistan's location kept Washington engaged. The alliance of convenience was fraying, but geography was preserving it for a future emergency neither side yet fully understood. That emergency arrived in December 1979, when Soviet tanks rolled into Afghanistan and the entire relationship was reborn in a darker form. But every earlier compromise was about to come due. As the years moved forward, the relationship kept changing form without ever escaping its original tension. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan transformed Pakistan from a complicated ally into an indispensable frontline state. Suddenly the map that American strategists had long admired in theory became urgent in practice. Pakistan bordered the country the Soviet Union had just entered by force. It possessed an army, an intelligence service, and a leadership under General Zia-ul-Haq willing to make common cause with Washington so long as doing so served Pakistan's own interests. The old alliance structures of the 1950s returned in altered form, less about formal pacts now, more about covert war, money, weapons, refugees, and ideology. For the United States, Afghanistan became a chance to bleed Soviet power without direct superpower war. Pakistan was the indispensable channel. The Inter-Service Intelligence Directorate, the ISI, became the key intermediary through which American and Saudi money and material reached Afghan resistance fighters. Refugee camps expanded on Pakistani soil. Training networks spread. Weapons crossed mountains and deserts. Washington often spoke publicly in the language of freedom and resistance. Islamabad spoke in the harder language of strategic depth, regime survival, and influence over Afghanistan's future. These languages overlapped enough to sustain cooperation, but they were never identical. The anti-Soviet jihad was the high point of U.S. Pakistan's strategic convergence and one of the most consequential episodes in the modern history of the wider region. It also planted seeds of future disorder on an enormous scale. Weapons, fighters, Islamist mobilization, intelligence habits, and the normalization of proxy war all thickened during the 1980s. Pakistan became central to a struggle that many in Washington treated as a brilliant Cold War opportunity. But for Pakistan, the war was not an episode to be switched off at will. It reshaped the frontier, militarized politics, empowered intelligence networks, and helped create a culture in which non-state armed actors would remain deeply entangled with state strategy long after the Soviets were gone. That should have been the turning point. It wasn't. Once again, the alliance of convenience was solving one problem by creating another. Washington got an anti-Soviet partner in the right place at the right time. Pakistan got money, arms, restored relevance, and the satisfaction of being courted once more as strategically indispensable. But both sides also locked themselves into a partnership whose immediate success depended on not asking what would happen after victory. The answer would arrive in the 1990s, and neither side would like it. The next turn in the story came when crisis forced both countries to reveal what they actually expected from one another. General Zia-ul-Haq's rule cannot be separated from this phase. He was in many ways the embodiment of how the alliance of convenience worked at its hardest edge. After overthrowing Bhutto in 1977 and later overseeing his execution, Zia faced legitimacy problems of his own. The Afghan War helped solve them. It gave his military regime external value, internal ideological resources, and a language of Islamic resistance that could be woven into domestic statecraft. Pakistan under Zia became a state where American strategic necessity, Saudi religious influence, and Pakistani military priorities converged in a combustible mixture. For Washington, Zia was not an attractive partner in liberal terms, but the Cold War has often rewarded usefulness over virtue. Aid resumed on a large scale. Cooperation widened. American officials who might otherwise have criticized authoritarianism found reasons to look elsewhere or speak more softly. Pakistan learned again that strategic relevance can wash away many objections in Washington. This lesson would leave deep traces in how Pakistani elites interpreted later American criticism. If democracy and human rights became urgent only when Pakistan's utility declined, then such principles could easily look selective rather than universal. Instead, the old pattern returned in a harsher form. Zia's Pakistan also pursued the nuclear program with determination while cooperating with the United States on Afghanistan. This produced one of the relationship's most revealing hypocrisies. Washington cared deeply about non-proliferation, but as long as the Soviet war made Pakistan indispensable, enforcement remained cautious and compromised. American officials were not unaware of what Pakistan was doing. They were trapped between two priorities. And when great powers are trapped between competing priorities, the one linked to immediate geopolitical struggle usually wins. Pakistan understood that clearly. It learned that if it remained useful enough, even serious American concerns could be postponed. The tragedy is that this bargain deepened the mistrust that would later poison the relationship. Pakistan concluded that American values were situational. The United States concluded, more quietly, that Pakistan would press every advantage created by American dependence. Both were right, and both carried those conclusions forward into the post-Soviet era. Seen from a distance, the alliance seems to move in chapters. Lived from within, it felt more like recurring weather. When the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan and the Cold War wound down, Pakistan confronted a transformation that felt painfully familiar. Once the immediate strategic emergency receded, American enthusiasm cooled. The anti-Soviet jihad had been framed as a great common cause, but once Moscow's retreat was accomplished, Washington's attention shifted. Pakistan, which had absorbed refugees, violence, narcotics traffic, militarization, and the empowerment of armed networks, now found itself living with the war's consequences while the superpower that had helped finance the struggle moved on to other priorities. And this is why the story never stays in the past for long. This period gave Pakistani political memory one of its strongest complaints: abandonment after service. The accusation has power not only because it is emotionally persuasive but because it contains a recognizable pattern. Pakistan had been praised, armed, and courted during crisis. Once crisis changed shape, sanctions and lectures returned. The Pressler Amendment, tied to concerns over Pakistan's nuclear program, became the instrument of this reversal. In 1990, the United States cut off most military aid after certifying that Pakistan did not possess a nuclear explosive device became impossible. For Pakistan, the timing felt like betrayal in legal form. A state once central to Washington's strategic map was now being punished under principles that had been selectively deferred while the Afghan war still mattered. The Pakistani military especially felt the sting. Equipment purchases were disrupted. Deliveries such as F-16 aircraft became a symbol of American unreliability. This was not just a procurement dispute. It was a case study in alliance memory. Institutions remember humiliation as clearly as they remember generosity, and often for longer. Officers and officials who had worked closely with the United States during the 1980s now had first-hand reasons to distrust Washington's constancy. Meanwhile, Afghanistan itself descended into civil war, and Pakistan continued trying to shape outcomes there with tools and networks built during the anti-Soviet struggle. The United States had left the stage, Pakistan had not. The 1990s therefore hardened the most cynical interpretation of the relationship. From Islamabad's point of view, America had used Pakistan to win a Cold War contest and then reverted to punishment once the immediate utility expired. From Washington's point of view, Pakistan had pursued nuclear weapons, tolerated or encouraged dangerous militant networks, and expected permanent indulgence. The alliance of convenience had survived one great common mission only to discover that convenience had always been time-limited. What came next did not overturn the old pattern so much as harden it. Because once crisis reappeared, everything old became useful again. The 1990s also brought a more unsettling development: the rise of the Taliban in Afghanistan and the growing visibility of transnational jihadist movements that had roots in the anti-Soviet era. Pakistan's security establishment viewed Afghanistan through the prism of rivalry with India, internal frontier management, and the desire for influence in Kabul. The United States viewed Afghanistan increasingly as a neglected conflict with humanitarian and terrorism implications, but not yet as the organizing priority it would become after 2001. This divergence mattered. Pakistan was still trying to shape the region in the language of strategic depth. Washington no longer saw the area through Cold War urgency, but neither did it fully reckon with the infrastructure of militancy that the 1980s had helped empower. At the same time, Pakistan's own politics remained unstable. Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif alternated through troubled civilian governments, each constrained by the military and by broader structural weakness. Democracy existed, but precariously. The United States often preferred civilian rule in principle, yet its dealings with Pakistan still revolved heavily around security institutions, nuclear anxieties, and crisis management. This continued the old pattern in subtler form. America spoke a democratic vocabulary, but the relationship's practical core remained strategic, military, and conditional. Nuclear tests in 1998 made the contradiction even sharper. India tested first, Pakistan responded, and both South Asian rivals entered the overt nuclear age. For Pakistan, the bomb represented the culmination of decades of insecurity, trauma, and determination. It was the hard guarantee no external partner had ever reliably supplied. For the United States, the tests were a non-proliferation failure and a regional danger. Sanctions followed, but so did a grudging recognition that South Asia's strategic environment had irrevocably changed. Pakistan had finally built the one thing it believed could prevent another 1971. In doing so, it had also made itself more central, more dangerous, and in some ways harder for Washington to discipline. Then came Kargil in 1999, when Pakistani forces and irregulars moved across the line of control in Kashmir, triggering a dangerous confrontation with India. The crisis ended in Pakistani withdrawal after heavy US pressure on Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. Once again, Pakistan learned the old lesson: American engagement in South Asian crises was real, but it did not exist to advance Pakistan's maximal goals. It existed to prevent a wider disaster, especially now that both states were nuclear. Utility, yes. Alignment of priorities, no. What looked like a reset was really a deeper repetition. If the first phase of the relationship was shaped by insecurity, the next was shaped by memory and asymmetry. The military coup of October 1999 brought General Pervez Musharraf to power and reopened one of the relationship's oldest channels: close dealing between Washington and a Pakistani general who promised order, strategic seriousness, and direct command over the institutions that mattered. But before the relationship could settle into a new equilibrium, the world changed. The attacks of September 11, 2001 turned Pakistan once again into a frontline state almost overnight. Afghanistan, long treated by Pakistan as a zone of influence and by the United States as a neglected periphery, became the center of American war planning. Geography returned with overwhelming force. There was no serious American campaign against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda that could ignore Pakistan. Musharraf understood immediately that Pakistan faced a brutal choice: refuse Washington and risk isolation, coercion, or worse. Cooperate and enter a war whose consequences would burn through Pakistan's own society. He chose cooperation. Pakistan provided airspace, logistics, intelligence, arrests, and access. Sanctions were lifted. Aid returned. Military ties deepened again with astonishing speed. The alliance of convenience had been reborn for a third great act. What had once been the anti-Soviet frontline was now the hinge of the American war on terror. Yet from the very beginning the partnership was unstable in ways both familiar and new. The United States wanted Pakistan to help destroy militant networks, deny sanctuary, and support a reordering of Afghanistan under American and Allied pressure. Pakistan wanted to avoid direct confrontation with the full spectrum of Islamist actors, preserve influence in Afghanistan, manage internal political risk, and keep one eye fixed on India. Washington needed Pakistan's cooperation. Islamabad needed American money, diplomatic cover, and relief from strategic isolation. But the two sides were still fighting different wars conceptually. The United States increasingly framed the conflict as an absolute struggle against transnational terrorism. Pakistan treated it as a layered problem in which some militants were enemies, some were assets, and some were dangerous liabilities to be handled through selective pressure rather than total war. And here the alliance stopped sounding like strategy and started sounding like fate. This difference was the heart of the post-9/11 relationship. Everything that followed, the arrests, the aid packages, the accusations, the drone strikes, the double-game rhetoric, the public distrust, grew out of that mismatch between what the United States demanded and what Pakistan believed its own strategic environment allowed. As the years moved forward, the relationship kept changing form without ever escaping its original tension. During the first years after the 9th of November, Pakistan seemed indispensable and suspect at the same time. Hundreds of Al-Qaeda operatives were captured or killed with Pakistani assistance. Intelligence cooperation produced real results. American supply lines into landlocked Afghanistan depended heavily on Pakistani routes and facilities. Billions of dollars in military and civilian aid flowed. Pakistan was designated a major non-NATO ally. The public language of partnership returned with force. Yet underneath that language, suspicion never stopped growing. American officials increasingly believed that elements of Pakistan's security establishment were distinguishing between enemies they were prepared to fight and insurgent actors they still considered useful in Afghanistan or Kashmir. Pakistan heard these accusations but understood its own predicament differently. From Islamabad's view, the United States had entered the region with maximal ambitions and limited patience. American policymakers often spoke as if militancy could be uprooted through enough military pressure, institutional reform, and political will. Pakistani leaders, especially in the military, thought this was naive. They believed Afghanistan's future would still require influence over Islamist networks once the Americans eventually left, because geography would still belong to Pakistan after America had gone home. In this sense, Pakistan's so-called double game was not simply duplicity. It was strategic hedging under conditions of deep distrust about American staying power. This was the phase when both sides needed each other most and trusted each other least. That hedge, however, came at a terrible cost. Militancy metastasized inside Pakistan itself. Suicide bombings, sectarian violence, insurgency in the tribal areas, attacks on the military, and the growth of anti-state jihadist groups demonstrated that the infrastructure of selective militant management was profoundly unstable. Pakistan was no longer merely manipulating violent actors at the edge of the state, it was being penetrated and wounded by them. This made the American demand for decisive action both more urgent and more dangerous. The Pakistani state could not simply press one button and separate useful militants from intolerable ones without destabilizing itself further. But Washington had little patience for that complexity when American soldiers were dying across the border in Afghanistan. The alliance of convenience had thus entered its most intimate and poisonous phase. The two states needed each other intensely. They also increasingly believed that the other was withholding the truth about its intentions. Cooperation and distrust no longer alternated, they operated simultaneously, often in the same week, sometimes in the same conversation. The next turn in the story came when crisis forced both countries to reveal what they actually expected from one another. No element of this period symbolized the relationship's contradictions more powerfully than the drone war. As the United States expanded targeted strikes in Pakistan's tribal areas, especially under the Bush and Obama administrations, it exposed the strange geometry of sovereignty in the alliance of convenience. Privately, elements of the Pakistani leadership often cooperated with or tolerated aspects of the campaign, seeing some value in the elimination of high-value militant targets. Publicly, Pakistani officials denounced the strikes as violations of sovereignty that inflamed public opinion and strengthened anti-Americanism. Both positions were, in their own way, true. Then came the kind of shock no relationship easily recovers from. For the United States, drones offered a way to hit militant sanctuaries in terrain where large-scale ground operations were politically and militarily difficult. Precision, deniability, and persistent surveillance seemed to promise a technological solution to safe havens. For Pakistan, the strikes created a devastating political paradox. The state could not openly own cooperation without appearing subordinate and complicit in the deaths of its own citizens. But it also could not fully stop the strikes without risking a more dangerous rupture with Washington at a moment when aid, diplomacy, and the Afghan war still made the relationship indispensable. The result was an atmosphere of permanent duplicity. American officials suspected Pakistani protest was partly theater. Pakistanis believed American talk of partnership concealed a willingness to act unilaterally whenever it chose. Civilians living under the drones absorbed yet another layer of violence in a region already saturated with it. The psychological consequences were profound. Villages heard aircraft they could not fight and decisions they could not influence. In Washington, analysts counted targets and disruptions. In Pakistan, the drone war entered public consciousness as proof that the United States treated the country less as a sovereign partner than as a battle space. This mattered because relationships are not sustained only by elite bargains. They are also sustained or poisoned by public narrative. In Pakistan, the drone campaign became one of the clearest popular symbols of why alliance with the United States felt degrading even when it was strategically useful. It made visible the hierarchy at the heart of the partnership. Seen from a distance, the alliance seems to move in chapters. Lived from within, it felt more like recurring weather. But that was only the opening bargain, not the real test. Then, in May 2011, came Abbottabad. The American raid that killed Osama bin Laden in a Pakistani garrison town did more than eliminate the world's most wanted militant leader. It detonated every unresolved suspicion inside the U.S.-Pakistan relationship at once. From the American side, the obvious question was impossible to avoid: how had bin Laden lived for years in Pakistan, near military institutions, without some level of protection, negligence, or deeper rot? From the Pakistani side, the question was equally devastating. How had American helicopters entered deep into Pakistani territory, conducted a high-profile operation, and left before the state could stop them? Abbottabad therefore humiliated both sides in different ways. The United States got its target, but at the cost of making public the degree of distrust that now defined the relationship. Washington had not informed Pakistan in advance because it feared compromise. Pakistan, meanwhile, faced the worst of all outcomes. Either it had known something it should not have known, or it had failed to know something it should have known. The raid was not just a tactical action. It was a verdict on the partnership. If an ally must be bypassed in order to strike the most important target of the war on terror on that ally's own soil, then the word ally has become dangerously thin. Public opinion in Pakistan hardened further. The Bin Laden raid was experienced not only as embarrassment but as proof that the United States would violate Pakistani sovereignty whenever it judged the stakes high enough. In the United States, patience with Pakistan eroded sharply. Years of aid, cooperation, pleading, and accusation now seemed to have led to the discovery of Bin Laden in a place where he was not supposed to be. Congress became more hostile. Intelligence links persisted, but the atmosphere turned colder and more openly transactional. Abbottabad did not end the relationship because geography and war still held both sides in place. But it destroyed whatever remained of the illusion that deep strategic trust might eventually emerge. After 2011, the alliance of convenience survived more nakedly than before. The masks were thinner. The resentments were fresher. The need remained. And this is where the relationship started revealing what it really was. What came next did not overturn the old pattern so much as harden it. The later years of the Afghan war only deepened this pattern. American officials increasingly described the Taliban's ability to regenerate from sanctuaries in Pakistan as one of the central reasons the war could not be won on American terms. Pakistani officials replied that no Afghan endgame was possible without recognizing Pakistan's interests and without addressing the instability created by a corrupt Afghan state, shifting US strategies, and the eventual certainty that foreign troops would not remain forever. Both statements contained truth. Both also concealed self-serving simplifications. Washington often underestimated how profoundly Pakistan's security establishment viewed Afghanistan through the prism of India and through the fear of encirclement. Islamabad often underestimated how impossible it was for any American administration to sustain a war indefinitely while believing its supposed partner was tolerating or managing the insurgent rais. This was not merely a disagreement over tactics. It was a disagreement over the shape of reality. The United States wanted Pakistan to prioritize America's war. Pakistan wanted America to recognize Pakistan's region. As US frustration grew, aid was periodically suspended, restored, conditioned, and argued over. Pakistan, for its part, diversified. China's importance increased. Gulf ties remained vital. The military and civilian leadership both sought ways to reduce dependence on Washington without losing the leverage that the relationship still offered. This balancing was not a clean break. Pakistan still needed the United States in international financial institutions, in military training, in diplomatic cover, and in the management of crises with India. But it no longer imagined the US connection in the elevated language of durable partnership. It increasingly imagined it as one pillar among several in a harsher and more multipolar environment. What came next changed the meaning of the alliance entirely. By the time American policy turned decisively toward exiting Afghanistan, the alliance had become fatigued. It had consumed extraordinary money, blood, political capital, and emotional bitterness. Yet it had still not answered the oldest question in the relationship: what remains when the immediate crisis passes? The answer, as before, was not nothing. But it was far less than alliance rhetoric had once promised. If the first phase of the relationship was shaped by insecurity, the next was shaped by memory and asymmetry. The American withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Taliban's return to power in 2021 forced both countries into another uncomfortable reckoning. For Washington, 2 decades of war had ended in a scene that looked to many like strategic exhaustion. For Pakistan, the outcome was more ambiguous. Some outside observers assumed Islamabad would greet a Taliban return as a clear victory. But triumph was never so simple. A friendly or dependent regime in Kabul had always been one Pakistani hope, yet Afghanistan under Taliban rule also threatened renewed militancy, refugee pressure, economic instability, and the possibility that violent movements inside Pakistan would be energized rather than contained. This ambiguity is crucial to understanding the post-withdrawal phase. The old American accusation that Pakistan wanted the Taliban back captured only one slice of a more complex reality. Pakistan's security establishment had long sought influence in Afghanistan and had often distinguished between hostile and usable Islamist actors. But a victorious Taliban movement also altered the balance inside Pakistan's own militant ecosystem. The Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, became a more dangerous issue. Border management with Afghanistan remained difficult. The dream of strategic depth once again collided with the reality that militant success is hard to confine geographically or politically. The real damage, though, was only beginning to show. For the United States, Afghanistan's end reduced Pakistan's immediate centrality, but it did not eliminate it. Counterterrorism concerns remained. So did concerns about nuclear security, regional stability, and the strategic consequences of China's deeper footprint in Pakistan. The relationship narrowed, but it did not disappear. Indeed, a quieter phase often reveals a relationship's true structure more clearly than a dramatic one. Without the giant machinery of an active American war next door, what remained was a set of more selective interests: counterterrorism, crisis management, limited economic engagement, regional diplomacy, and the ever-present question of what Pakistan's geography would mean in the next emergency. In other words, the alliance of convenience survived the Afghan withdrawal precisely because it had never depended on shared affection. It depended on recurrence. Crises keep returning to South and Central Asia, and when they do, Pakistan and the United States keep finding themselves relevant to one another again, even if they no longer pretend the relationship is simple. As the years moved forward, the relationship kept changing form without ever escaping its original tension. China's rise has given the Pakistan-US relationship a new layer without replacing the old ones. The China-Pakistan relationship is often described in Pakistan with the language of all-weather friendship, and Beijing's role in infrastructure, arms supply, and strategic backing has unquestionably grown, especially through the China-Pakistan economic corridor. For Washington, this development is both a concern and a constraint. Pakistan is no longer the kind of quasi-exclusive security partner it may once have appeared in the 1950s or 1980s. It is a state whose strategic options are wider, whose elite networks are more diversified, and whose value to the United States is now partly shaped by great power competition with China. This is the moment where convenience started to look like dependence. But here again, convenience is the key word. Pakistan does not want to become merely China's appendage any more than it ever wanted to be America's. Its elite tradition is one of extracting room for maneuver from larger powers, not of surrendering agency voluntarily. That means the United States retains opportunities, especially in trade, technology, finance, and diplomacy. Yet it also means Washington can no longer assume that aid or security ties alone define the relationship. Pakistan's leverage now partly comes from its ability to signal alternatives. This does not automatically strengthen Pakistan. Diversification can reduce dependence, but it can also create new pressures. Debt, domestic political instability, energy shortages, and persistent security concerns mean that Pakistan still values relations with the United States and with institutions in which the United States remains influential. American support or opposition still matters in international financial negotiations. American export controls, investment decisions, and diplomatic gestures still carry weight. The relationship is therefore no longer best understood as an alliance nested inside one bloc. It is better understood as a recurring bargain between states that know they cannot fully trust one another and cannot entirely afford not to deal with one another either. That bargain has become cooler, more transactional, and less wrapped in grand ideological language. In some ways that makes it more honest than before. In other ways it makes it easier for each side to retreat into cynicism. The old emotional vocabulary of betrayal and dependence never fully disappears. It simply finds new occasions on which to surface. The next turn in the story came when crisis forced both countries to reveal what they actually expected from one another. And then the relationship entered its most dangerous phase. Domestic politics in both countries have repeatedly magnified the alliance's tensions. In Pakistan, anti-Americanism has often been politically useful not because it is invented from nothing, but because it can draw on real memories, sanctions after cooperation, drone strikes during partnership, lectures from officials whose own strategic record appears selective, and a broader sense that Washington alternates between intrusion and neglect. Politicians across the spectrum have learned that criticizing the United States can signal patriotism, independence, or moral seriousness, even when those same politicians quietly seek American support in private. In the United States, Pakistan has often been discussed through cycles of simplification. At one moment it is the indispensable Muslim ally, nuclear-armed but cooperative, a bridge into difficult regions and an intelligence partner against dangerous enemies. At another moment it is portrayed as duplicitous, corrupted, radicalized, ungrateful, or strategically incoherent. Both caricatures miss the deeper structure. Pakistan is not simply a victim of American power, nor is it simply a manipulator of American fear. It is a state shaped by acute insecurity, elite fragmentation, military dominance in key strategic spheres, and a persistent effort to use larger powers without being consumed by them. The United States, meanwhile, is not simply fickle. It is a superpower whose global priorities repeatedly outrun its patience for the local logics that shape partners like Pakistan. These domestic narratives matter because they become part of state behavior. Officials do not operate outside public mood. Military ties can be sustained under tension, but legislatures, media ecosystems, and electorates still influence what kinds of bargains look acceptable. Each country has, at different times, found it politically easier to accuse the other of bad faith than to admit the more uncomfortable truth: the relationship keeps disappointing because each side enters it hoping the other will someday reorder its priorities. That never quite happens. Pakistan will continue to care first about India, internal stability, Afghanistan, and the survivability of its security state. The United States will continue to care first about whatever larger strategic framework dominates its global moment, whether that is communism, terrorism, China, Iran, or something yet to come. Because those hierarchies are different, the relationship can be functional, even intense, without ever becoming psychologically secure. But every earlier compromise was about to come due. Seen from a distance, the alliance seems to move in chapters. Lived from within, it felt more like recurring weather. There is another dimension to the story that often gets lost beneath generals, presidents, and intelligence chiefs, the people who moved between the two countries and built a quieter relationship under the louder one. Students, doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, academics, military officers, aid workers, diplomats' children, migrants, and Pakistani Americans created a social world more complicated than the strategic headlines. Educational exchange, remittances, diaspora success, cultural familiarity, and professional networks gave the relationship depth beyond the battlefield and the crisis room. This matters because it shows that the alliance of convenience was never only a state-to-state arrangement. It also shaped lives. Pakistani doctors trained in American institutions and returned home or remained abroad. American aid projects changed local landscapes in uneven ways. Pakistani students absorbed ideas, opportunities, and frustrations in the United States and then reinterpreted them through South Asian realities. The diaspora became a bridge, sometimes celebrated, sometimes distrusted, but always part of the larger story. When state relations cooled, these social links often endured. When state relations warmed, they were sometimes instrumentalized as evidence of friendship deeper than policy might suggest. But people-to-people ties did not dissolve the harder structure. A Pakistani-American family might navigate identity, success, and belonging in the United States while watching drone strikes on the television news and hearing officials describe Pakistan as both ally and problem. A military officer might admire American professionalism while resenting American lectures. A US diplomat might cultivate real affection for Pakistani society while knowing that the policy relationship remained fundamentally conditional. Human connection complicated the alliance, but it did not cure its strategic asymmetry. That should have been the turning point. It wasn't. Still, this dimension belongs in the story because it prevents the whole relationship from collapsing into cold instrumentality. States used each other repeatedly. People, meanwhile, built memories that were not reducible to convenience alone. The tragedy is that these quieter relationships often had to live in the shadow of louder emergencies. Yet their persistence is one reason the connection between Pakistan and the United States has survived so many periods of official frustration. What came next did not overturn the old pattern so much as harden it. If the relationship has a recurring emotional structure, it is this: urgency produces intimacy, and the end of urgency reveals how little trust was ever built underneath. The 1950s produced pacts and military aid, but war with India revealed the limits. The 1980s produced intelligence intimacy and shared covert war, but the Soviet exit produced sanctions and abandonment. The post-9/11 period produced a vast security partnership, but Abbottabad, drones, and the Taliban exposed corrosive suspicion. Each cycle leaves behind institutions, grievances, and memories that then shape the next cycle. In this way, the relationship accumulates history without fully learning from it. This failure of learning is not because the actors are foolish. It is because the structural incentives are strong. Washington repeatedly returns to Pakistan when a crisis makes Pakistan unavoidable. Islamabad repeatedly returns to Washington when it needs money, legitimacy, weapons, or diplomatic weight that no other partner can fully supply. Both sides enter each renewed phase believing they are wiser than before. Both discover that old expectations return quickly under pressure. Americans want cleaner cooperation than Pakistan's regional calculations allow. Pakistanis want more reliable backing than America's global priorities will sustain. Convenience does not erase these divergences, it only postpones their consequences. Instead, the old pattern returned in a harsher form. There is a harsh kind of respect in this. Unlike romantic alliances, the Pakistan-U.S. relationship has survived precisely because neither side ever had the luxury of mistaking it for innocence. Each knows the other can be useful and damaging at the same time. Each knows the relationship's value rises in moments of danger. Each knows that moral vocabulary often follows strategic need rather than leads it. This makes the partnership unattractive to those who want a cleaner story. It also makes it historically durable. It has outlived illusions because it was never built entirely from them. And yet the cost of such durability is high. Populations grow cynical. Crises are managed but not transformed. Militancy is fought and reproduced. Aid is given and resented. Sovereignty is defended publicly and compromised privately. A relationship can survive all this. The harder question is whether it can ever become something better than the emergency logic that keeps renewing it. If the first phase of the relationship was shaped by insecurity, the next was shaped by memory and asymmetry. These days, the relationship is narrower than it was in the age of Sito, Zia, or the first decade after the 9th of November, but it is not gone. Official language increasingly emphasizes trade, energy, critical minerals, investment, and counterterrorism rather than grand alliance identity. That shift reflects a reality both sides now understand. The United States is no longer organizing South Asia around the same wars that once made Pakistan central. Pakistan is no longer prepared to imagine American partnership as the sole or even principal axis of its external strategy. The relationship has become more selective, more openly transactional, and in some ways more realistic. And this is why the story never stays in the past for long. At the same time, Pakistan still matters to Washington because geography has not changed. It still sits at the junction of South Asia, Afghanistan, Iran, China, and the Gulf. In any regional emergency involving Afghanistan's instability, nuclear risk, militant networks, energy corridors, or diplomacy with neighboring powers, Pakistan can quickly become relevant again. Recent official meetings have highlighted economic cooperation and security dialogue, while broader regional diplomacy has reminded observers that Islamabad still seeks to present itself as a useful intermediary where American interests and regional crises intersect. That is the modern form of the old pattern. The rhetoric has softened and the scale has narrowed, but convenience remains the operating principle. Pakistan offers location, channels, intelligence relevance, and regional access. The United States offers markets, institutions, influence, and attention that still matter even in a more multipolar era. Neither side appears under any illusion that trust has been fully rebuilt. Too many episodes remain alive in institutional memory: 1965, 1971, Pressler, drones, Abbottabad, the long Afghan war, and the repeated sensation in Pakistan that Washington arrives urgently and departs abruptly once its priorities change. So if there is a final chapter to the story, it is not that the alliance ended. It is that the alliance became more honest about what it had always been. Not a friendship guaranteed by shared values. Not a durable security union grounded in identical priorities. But a recurring bargain between unequal states forced together by history, crisis, and geography. That bargain may tighten again in some future emergency. It may cool further in quieter years. But as long as the map remains what it is, and as long as both states continue to matter at the intersections of South Asia, the Muslim world, China, Afghanistan, and nuclear politics, neither can fully dismiss the other. As the years moved forward, the relationship kept changing form without ever escaping its original tension. Because once crisis reappeared, everything old became useful again. In the end, the most revealing thing about Pakistan and the United States is not that they keep disappointing one another. It is that disappointment never quite ends the relationship. That tells us something important about both countries and about the world they inhabit. The United States, for all its power, repeatedly discovers that certain regions cannot be managed from a distance without local partners who come with their own histories and agendas. Pakistan, for all its suspicion of dependence, repeatedly discovers that regional insecurity and domestic fragility make complete strategic autonomy more aspiration than fact. Each returns to the other not because memory has been healed, but because circumstances keep making contact rational again. For Washington, Pakistan has been a frontier state, an intelligence platform, a difficult ally, a nuclear concern, a diplomatic channel, a counterterrorism partner, a source of frustration, and a test of how far American power can shape a region whose internal logics it never fully controls. For Pakistan, the United States has been an arms supplier, a patron, a source of international legitimacy, a source of sanctions, an unreliable protector, a necessary channel to finance and diplomacy, and the superpower whose crises keep rearranging South Asian politics. Those meanings do not cancel one another. They pile up. They become the sediment of policy. That is why the title still fits. This was an alliance of convenience in the 1950s when Pakistan joined America's Cold War pacts. It was an alliance of convenience in the 1980s when jihad was weaponized against Soviet occupation. It was an alliance of convenience after the 9th of November when the war on terror redrew the map of necessity. And it remains an alliance of convenience now, in a cooler, more selective form, because trust has never been the relationship's foundation. Geography is. Crisis is. Need is. Those are stronger than affection and more durable than rhetoric. The temptation, especially from afar, is to ask whether Pakistan and the United States are friends or enemies. History suggests a different answer. They are neither, or rather they are each at different moments but never in ways stable enough to define the whole. They are two states that keep discovering that their paths cross most intensely when the region is in trouble. And because the region has seldom stayed out of trouble for long, the story keeps going. What looked like a reset was really a deeper repetition. In one sense, that is the bleakest possible ending, because it suggests a relationship condemned to repetition. But there is another way to read it. The fact that the connection survives crisis after crisis means it is more than a temporary marriage of convenience in the shallow sense. It is a durable, if uneasy, feature of modern Asian and global politics. It has shape, memory, institutional depth, and social residue. It has helped determine the wars of Afghanistan, the balance of South Asia, the politics of non-proliferation, the strategic opening to China, and the way Washington thinks about Muslim-majority states that are too important to ignore and too complicated to command. This is why the relationship remains historically worth studying even when it appears exhausted. It is one of the clearest examples of how great powers and regional states bind themselves together under pressure without ever fully sharing the same map of the world. Pakistan has never been only a client, and the United States has never been only a patron. Each has manipulated, disappointed, and relied upon the other. Each has also discovered that some strategic relationships endure precisely because they are not built on sentiment. They endure because they answer recurring needs, and because the world keeps producing the kinds of crises that reactivate those needs. Pakistan and the United States have spent nearly 8 decades circling one another through war, diplomacy, suspicion, aid, sanctions, intelligence bargains, and public arguments. The names change. The emergencies change. The rhetoric changes. But the underlying pattern remains recognizable. Geography keeps making Pakistan significant. Global crisis keeps drawing the United States back. Neither side gets quite the relationship it wants. Both keep finding reasons not to walk away. That is the story. Not a love story, not a morality play, and not a simple tale of betrayal. A harder story than that. A story about power and need. A story about unequal partners meeting again and again at the point where their interests overlap just enough to matter. A story in which every embrace contains suspicion, every rupture leaves a channel open, and every new crisis arrives carrying the memory of the old one. And here the alliance stopped sounding like strategy and started sounding like fate. An alliance of convenience, then. Not because it was shallow. Because it was conditional. And because condition, not conviction, has always been the real grammar of the relationship. There is also a moral lesson buried inside this history. States often tell themselves that using a partner for a limited strategic purpose does not permanently shape that partner's politics. The record of U.S.-Pakistan relations suggests the opposite. Aid, training, intelligence cooperation, covert war, sanctions, and diplomatic indulgence all changed institutions inside Pakistan, just as Pakistani strategies of selective cooperation changed American assumptions about alliance, sovereignty, and counterterrorism. Neither side remained untouched by the bargains it made. Short-term convenience became long-term structure. The consequences did not stay in briefing papers. They entered schools, refugee camps, borderlands, military doctrines, public narratives, and family memory. Nor can the relationship be understood outside the rivalry with India, because that rivalry has been the constant gravitational force on the Pakistani side of the equation. American officials have repeatedly tried to widen the agenda, asking Pakistan to think more about communism, Afghanistan, terrorism, economic reform, China, or regional diplomacy. Pakistan has repeatedly pulled the agenda back toward the balance with India, because for Pakistan state elite the question of India has never been peripheral. It has been the background condition against which every external partnership is measured. The United States never fully accepted that hierarchy. Pakistan never stopped expecting it to matter. Entire decades of misunderstanding grew from that single unresolved divergence. If there is a final irony, it is that both countries have often described the other as duplicitous while practicing their own forms of strategic ambiguity. The United States has spoken the language of principle while repeatedly prioritizing expedience. Pakistan has spoken the language of sovereign necessity while repeatedly trying to preserve options through selective opacity. These are not equal powers, and their responsibilities are not identical, but the history becomes clearer once we stop imagining that one side corrupted a fundamentally pure relationship. The relationship was born in asymmetry and matured in ambiguity. That is why it has been so resilient and so bruising at the same time. This was the phase when both sides needed each other most and trusted each other least. Today, when officials speak of trade, minerals, energy, investment, and regional dialogue, the vocabulary is calmer than in the years of jihad or drone war. But quieter language does not mean history has ended. It means history has changed register. The old military urgency has receded, while the broader logic remains. Washington still looks for ways to keep Pakistan engaged without making it central to every regional problem. Islamabad still looks for ways to stay relevant to Washington without becoming trapped inside American priorities. That is the contemporary form of the bargain, less romantic, less dramatic, but recognizably descended from everything that came before. And so the relationship remains suspended between memory and necessity. Memory keeps telling each side why caution is justified. Necessity keeps telling each side why disengagement is incomplete. That tension may not produce trust, but it does produce continuity. In international politics, continuity without trust is often a sign not of failure but of structural importance. Pakistan and the United States matter too much to one another in too many intermittent ways for indifference ever to become permanent. They continue, therefore, not because they have solved the past, but because the map keeps placing them back inside one another's future. One way to see the whole relationship more clearly is through Kashmir, because Kashmir was present at the birth of Pakistan and has remained the silent interpreter of every American gesture ever since. From Washington's point of view, Kashmir was usually a dangerous regional dispute to be managed, cooled, mediated, or postponed. From Pakistan's point of view, it was the unfinished business of partition and the central reminder that security could never be treated as abstract. This difference mattered from the very beginning. American officials could imagine a South Asia in which Pakistan and India were both important states whose disputes should not derail larger strategy. Pakistani officials rarely enjoyed that luxury. They saw Indian size, conventional superiority, diplomatic reach, and historical rivalry as the permanent context of state survival. Whenever Pakistan entered American alliances, therefore, Kashmir was present whether it was named or not. Whenever Washington withheld support in moments of Indo-Pakistani war, Kashmir returned as proof that the United States did not really understand what Pakistan thought it had signed up for. The relationship cannot be understood without this continuing asymmetry of attention. America repeatedly looked at Pakistan through the world. Pakistan repeatedly looked at the world through India. This is also why even apparently distant episodes of U.S.-Pakistan cooperation were always shadowed by South Asian calculations. When Pakistan offered bases, joined pacts, or facilitated intelligence operations, it was not only seeking money or diplomatic favor. It was trying to convert global strategic relevance into regional leverage. Some American officials understood that and hoped to manage it. Others believed time and partnership would gradually align Pakistani priorities with wider Western goals. That never quite happened. Pakistan could participate fully in anti-communist frameworks while still measuring success in South Asian terms. The United States could pour in aid while still believing the real purpose of the relationship lay elsewhere. Kashmir stood at the center of this durable misunderstanding. It was the case Pakistan wanted America to take seriously as existential. It was the case America feared would overdefine a relationship it wanted to place in larger systems of order. Then came the kind of shock no relationship easily recovers from. The intelligence relationship deserves its own place in the story because it was often deeper, more functional, and more honest than the public diplomacy layered on top of it. States frequently say one thing in public and another in the rooms where they exchange secrets. With Pakistan and the United States, this difference became especially pronounced. From the early Cold War listening posts to the anti-Soviet jihad, from post-9/11 captures to the long argument over militant sanctuaries, intelligence services formed the muscles and nerves of the alliance of convenience. Politicians came and went. Speeches rose and collapsed. Public narratives hardened and softened. But intelligence cooperation, even at moments of open mistrust, often persisted because both sides believed they could still gain something concrete from the exchange. In that sense, the relationship was never simply diplomatic. It was operational. Yet operational intimacy can produce its own kind of poison. Intelligence agencies are not built for innocence. They traffic in partial truths, controlled access, proxies, deniability, and categories of usefulness that rarely survive public scrutiny. The CIA and the ISI could work together effectively on one problem while quietly preparing against one another's assumptions on another. Each learned the other's habits. Each developed files, suspicions, and channels that became sources of leverage. This gave the alliance resilience. It also made it harder for either side to believe fully in the other's stated intentions. Intelligence cooperation creates powerful evidence of shared need, but it also normalizes the idea that partners are never fully transparent. When that logic spills upward into politics, the entire relationship becomes shadowed by a sense that the real conversation is happening elsewhere. The A.Q. Khan story is another crucial chapter because it concentrated nearly every tension in the relationship into one figure and one network. Pakistan's nuclear program had always been understood in Washington as a proliferation problem wrapped inside an alliance problem. During the 1980s, the anti-Soviet struggle had encouraged selective blindness. In the 1990s, sanctions expressed belated alarm. But the later revelation that A.Q. Khan's network had spread nuclear technology and expertise beyond Pakistan to states including Iran, Libya, and North Korea intensified American fears far beyond South Asia. For Washington, the issue was no longer only that Pakistan had built the bomb despite US objections. It was that elements of Pakistan's nuclear story had become global. The non-proliferation challenge had escaped the bilateral frame. For Pakistan, the affair exposed yet another contradiction between state pride and international vulnerability. A.Q. Khan was not simply a scientist. He was a national hero in the public imagination, a symbol of technological defiance and strategic salvation after humiliation. To fully expose the network and its operating environment would have meant tearing open a story through which the Pakistani state had narrated its own survival. But to contain the fallout and preserve broader relationships, Islamabad had to acknowledge enough wrongdoing to satisfy immediate diplomatic demands. The result was an unsatisfying compromise in which Khan was disgraced and protected at once. For Americans, this looked like partial accountability masking deeper opacity. For Pakistanis, American outrage could still look selective, given how often larger strategic priorities had overridden proliferation concerns in earlier years. Once again, the alliance of convenience generated a familiar pattern, a crisis in which both sides had enough evidence to distrust the other and enough reason not to sever relations completely. But that was only the opening bargain, not the real test. The post-9/11 years also included a series of shocks that deepened the sense that the relationship had become combustible at the level of public psychology. The Raymond Davis affair in 2011, when a CIA contractor killed 2 Pakistanis in Lahore, became one such moment. What might have been treated purely as a legal and diplomatic dispute instead exploded into a national scandal because it confirmed so many existing suspicions. Here was an American link to intelligence activity, armed, operating inside Pakistan, and at the center of a crisis over sovereignty, secrecy, and impunity. The eventual resolution through compensation did not calm the deeper issue. It reinforced the public sense that a hidden architecture of US activity existed inside Pakistan and that ordinary law bent under strategic pressure. Then came the Salalah incident later the same year, when a NATO airstrike killed Pakistani soldiers near the Afghan border. Pakistan responded furiously, shutting NATO supply routes and forcing a renegotiation of terms. The episode mattered not only for its immediate military and logistical consequences but because it struck directly at the prestige and honor of the Pakistani army, the very institution that had most deeply managed the relationship with Washington over decades. If even that institution could be hit by American force and then expected to restore cooperation under pressure, what exactly did partnership mean? Salalah, like Abbottabad, became a landmark in the accumulation of grievance. It deepened the Pakistani belief that Washington demanded help while failing to treat Pakistan as fully sovereign or fully respected. In the United States, such crises fed a counter-narrative that Pakistan was hypersensitive, manipulative, and more interested in extracting concessions than in confronting shared threats. These were not just disagreements over single incidents. They were layers added to the sediment of a long, suspicious history. There is also the question of political Islam, which neither side ever approached with the same conceptual map. For the United States, especially after 2001, Islamist militancy tended to be grouped within a global threat framework that emphasized terrorism, transnational networks, radicalization, and safe havens. For Pakistan, political Islam has always been entangled with state formation, identity, domestic legitimacy, regional rivalry, and strategic patronage. The same movement or actor could appear differently depending on whether one was looking from Washington, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, Kabul, or Srinagar. This difference generated endless friction because American policy often demanded categorical clarity where Pakistani strategy lived by distinctions, gradients, and tactical compartmentalization. Pakistan did not deny that some militant actors were dangerous, it refused to accept the American demand that all categories of militant usefulness could be erased at once without altering Pakistan's own security posture. Washington, meanwhile, increasingly interpreted selective tolerance as complicity. This is where the relationship became trapped in a loop of accusation and necessity. The United States could not fully abandon Pakistan without undermining its own campaigns. Pakistan could not fully satisfy the United States without risking strategic positions it believed it needed in the region. So the argument became permanent. It shifted tone, volume, and venue, but it never disappeared. The "do more" complaint from Washington and the "we have already paid too high a price" answer from Pakistan became ritualized. Both contained truth. Both also concealed what the other side considered essential. The Americans counted years of aid, dead soldiers, and cross-border insurgent regeneration. The Pakistanis counted bombings at home, millions displaced, frontier militarization, and the fear that America would eventually leave chaos behind as it had before. And this is where the relationship started revealing what it really was. Economics, too, deserves more than a supporting role in this story. It is easy to treat the relationship as all war, coups, and intelligence intrigue, but trade, aid conditionality, debt, and development debates have shaped the alliance's texture at every stage. American aid was never simply generosity. It was a strategic instrument, a signaling mechanism, a bureaucratic system, and a recurring source of resentment. Pakistan accepted it because the need was real. It also resented the way aid came tied to monitoring, benchmarks, lectures, and the quiet implication that dependence diminished dignity. The United States, for its part, repeatedly grew frustrated that large flows of money did not produce the reforms, loyalties, or institutional outcomes it expected. Development became politicized by alliance just as alliance was politicized by development. This helps explain why newer areas such as energy, trade, and critical minerals now matter so much in official language. They offer a way of speaking about the relationship without immediately invoking war, sanctuaries, or sanctions. They promise a different grammar, not alliance against an enemy but cooperation around opportunity. Yet even here, history shadows the vocabulary. Pakistan hears economic partnership through the memory of conditionality and abandonment. The United States hears opportunity through the memory of corruption, instability, and uneven implementation. Neither side can simply step into a clean slate. Economic engagement may be calmer than covert war, but it still travels through institutions shaped by decades of strategic distrust. Another reason the relationship keeps returning is that both states remain powerful in each other's imaginations even when formal ties cool. Pakistan occupies a large symbolic space in Washington because it compresses so many American anxieties at once: nuclear weapons, Islamic politics, terrorism, military dominance over civilian institutions, rivalry with India, Afghan instability, Chinese influence, and the question of whether state partnership can ever truly reshape a difficult political environment. Pakistan is, in American strategic thought, often less a single issue than a cluster of unresolved ones. The United States occupies a large symbolic space in Pakistan for parallel reasons: patronage, pressure, prestige, duplicity, modernity, humiliation, opportunity, and external power in one overwhelming image. This symbolic density matters. It means the relationship is never just policy. It is also a theater in which each side projects fears and aspirations larger than the bilateral ledger. That is why even periods of reduced contact never feel like genuine indifference. The relationship can narrow, but it rarely becomes irrelevant. Too much history is stored inside it. Too many institutions still remember how to reactivate the channels. Too many crises in the region can still make the old pattern look useful again. And so the alliance of convenience survives not because it has become stable, but because instability repeatedly recreates the conditions for its return. What came next changed the meaning of the alliance entirely. If this story has a true protagonist, it is not a leader. It is strategic mismatch. Again and again, the two countries come together because they need each other in a given moment, and again they discover that the reasons for that need are not the same on both sides. Pakistan enters the relationship seeking security, leverage, and room for maneuver in an unforgiving region. the United States enters it seeking a partner useful to some larger global design. That design changes with the decades: communism, China, Afghanistan, terrorism, great power rivalry, regional diplomacy. Pakistan's hierarchy of anxieties changes less. India remains central. Afghanistan remains immediate. State survival remains concrete. This is why the alliance repeatedly disappoints. Convenience can bring states together. It cannot by itself make their maps of danger converge. And yet perhaps the most remarkable thing is not that the relationship failed to become what either side hoped. It is that it became, despite everything, one of the most durable and consequential strategic relationships in modern Asian history. It helped shape the Cold War in South Asia. It influenced the opening to China. It transformed the Afghan jihad into a world event. It affected the spread of nuclear weapons. It shaped the war on terror. It continues to matter in the politics of the Muslim world, in discussions of China's rise, in questions of Iran, and in every conversation about South Asia's future. That is a great deal of history for a relationship supposedly built only on convenience. But perhaps convenience is stronger than we like to admit. It can build institutions, habits, expectations, and scars that outlive the moments that produced them. It can generate a durable if uneasy architecture of contact. It can survive the death of leaders, the collapse of wars, and the bitterness of betrayal. Pakistan and the United States did not become allies because they trusted one another. They became allies because at repeated moments each side believed the other could help solve an urgent problem. The problem changed. The urgency changed. The memory of disappointment accumulated. But the pattern remained. And because the pattern remains, the story is not over. The real damage, though, was only beginning to show. There is one more angle without which the story remains incomplete: the military as the real long-term custodian of the alliance on the Pakistani side. Civilian leaders have come and gone, sometimes with real authority, often without enough of it. Political parties have risen, split, returned, and fallen again. Constitutions have been suspended and restored. Yet across these cycles, the army and its associated institutions have preserved an unusually continuous memory of the American relationship. That memory is not sentimental. It is technical, strategic, and wounded. It includes training programs, weapon systems, intelligence channels, crisis diplomacy, embargoes, withheld aircraft, and the repeated discovery that Washington can be warm in private and cold in public with startling speed. This institutional continuity explains why the relationship has often seemed to bypass Pakistan's formal democratic life. American policymakers repeatedly say they prefer democratic stability, but when they require rapid decisions on security, logistics, or nuclear risk, they almost always find themselves talking to the military establishment because that is where continuity lies. The consequence is circular. The more central the military becomes to Washington's practical dealings with Pakistan, the more the larger relationship is shaped by security logic rather than democratic transformation. The more that happens, the harder it becomes to create the broader civilian trust that might one day make the alliance something other than convenient. This is one reason the relationship has proven so resistant to moral simplification. It is easy to condemn American hypocrisy, and there is much to condemn. It is easy to condemn Pakistani double games, and there is much to condemn there too. But the real historical problem is deeper than hypocrisy. It is that both states repeatedly used one another through institutions best suited to emergency and mistrust rather than political generosity. When crisis comes, intelligence agencies, armed forces, and executive branches move first. Legislatures, publics, courts, and educators come later if they come at all. That ordering leaves a mark. It teaches both countries to know one another primarily through threat perception. Even when trade, culture, education, and diaspora links grow, the strategic skeleton underneath remains dominant. It is difficult to build a stable, high-trust relationship atop institutions that learned each other first through covert operations and coercive bargaining. There is also the question of time. American policy often moves in bursts tied to administrations, wars, and media cycles. Pakistani policy, especially within the military establishment, often moves with a slower historical memory shaped by repeated crises with India and by the belief that external powers come and go while geography remains. This temporal mismatch has repeatedly warped expectations. Washington arrives with urgency and asks for immediate cooperation in the language of decisive campaigns and policy windows. Islamabad listens through a different clock. It asks what happens after the campaign, after the administration, after the war, after the press conference, after the superpowers' attention moves elsewhere. Because the United States has repeatedly changed course or reduced commitment once its immediate priorities shifted, Pakistan has become even less willing to treat American urgency as permanent. The result is one of the most damaging feedback loops in the relationship. American officials interpret Pakistani hedging as bad faith. Pakistani officials interpret American impatience as proof that hedging is rational. Each side's experience confirms the instinct that angers the other. This temporal mismatch also explains why current efforts to redefine the relationship through economics and selective diplomacy may matter more than they first appear. Security cooperation creates intensity, but economic and institutional cooperation, if sustained, can create duration of a different kind. Whether that will happen here is another matter. The obstacles are obvious: domestic instability in Pakistan, shifting priorities in Washington, Chinese competition, unresolved militant networks, and the persistent gravitational force of India on Pakistani strategic thinking. Still, if the relationship is ever to become less punitive and less cyclical, it would have to be built through domains that are not activated only by emergency. Trade, education, technology, public health, water, energy, and climate adaptation sound less dramatic than covert war and border crisis, but they may be the only fields in which a less exhausted future could be imagined. The irony is that a relationship famous for strategic necessity may need less strategy, not more, if it is ever to escape the trap of convenience. This is the moment where convenience started to look like dependence. Yet history counsels caution. Convenience has always returned because it works just well enough to survive. It allows each side to get something important without solving the deeper problem between them. For Pakistan, the relationship brings access, influence, institutional links, financial possibilities, and strategic recognition. For the United States, it brings a channel into a nuclear-armed Muslim-majority state at the crossroads of major theaters. Those benefits are real. They are also insufficient to create trust. And so the partnership persists in its familiar register, not intimate enough to be relaxed, not broken enough to be discarded, and never simple enough to be named with the easy language of friendship. This may be the final truth of the story. Pakistan and the United States did not fail to become something nobler because of one bad leader, one war, or one betrayal. They remained what they were because the conditions that produced the relationship rewarded utility more than conviction from the beginning. They met in a violent century under the pressure of partition, the Cold War, nuclear fear, and wars in Afghanistan. They carried those conditions forward into the 21st century. They learned to cooperate through ambiguity because ambiguity kept the relationship alive. They learned to distrust because distrust was often the only honest response to what they had each done under pressure. If they remain tied today, it is because history did not leave either of them a clean exit from the other. The map still matters. The memory still matters. The crisis to come, whatever form it takes, may still matter most of all. So the alliance of convenience endures. Not because it was ever stable. Because instability keeps making it relevant. Perhaps the deepest reason the relationship remains so difficult to summarize is that both countries have, at different times, been right about the other. Pakistan has been right that the United States often treats partnership as provisional, rising to intimacy under pressure and receding when the emergency passes. The United States has been right that Pakistan repeatedly tries to preserve options that undercut the clarity Washington wants from an ally. Pakistan has been right that geography imposes burdens outsiders rarely feel in full. The United States has been right that selective tolerance for militant actors creates disasters larger than any tactical gain. These truths do not reconcile into harmony. They harden into memory. But taken together, they explain why the relationship survives so many crises while satisfying neither side. And then the relationship entered its most dangerous phase. For historians, that makes the story unusually revealing. It is not a simple case of patron and client, because Pakistan never stopped trying to manipulate the connection for its own ends. It is not a simple case of anti-imperial resistance, because Pakistani elites repeatedly sought American power when it suited them. It is not a simple alliance, because the hierarchy of threats was never shared. It is not a simple betrayal narrative, because cooperation was often real and consequential even when trust was absent. Instead, it is a story about what happens when two unequal states meet repeatedly at the intersection of necessity. They do not merge into one strategic mind. They bargain. They accuse. They improvise. They remember. And then, when the region catches fire again, they return to the table. That is why the alliance of convenience remains one of the central relationships in the modern history of South Asia and the broader Muslim world. It tells us what great powers want, what regional states fear, and how both can be transformed by the bargains they make under pressure. It shows how wars begin in one vocabulary and end in another. It shows how aid can become resentment, how intimacy can become humiliation, how abandonment can become doctrine, and how even the coldest partnerships can leave behind institutions that outlive the crises that made them. Above all, it shows that in international politics convenience is never merely opportunism. Sometimes it is the rough, unsentimental form that durability takes. And so the story closes where it began, not with affection, but with need. Pakistan and the United States have needed one another in ways neither fully likes to admit. That need has changed shape over the decades, but it has never vanished. As long as the region remains unstable, as long as geography continues to matter, and as long as both states keep discovering that some problems cannot be managed alone, the alliance of convenience will remain unfinished. That is why the story lasts. Not because it was noble, and not because it was stable, but because history kept making it necessary. An alliance of convenience, yes, but also one of the clearest examples of how power, fear, and geography can keep two states tied together long after trust has failed. But the story did not stop with the end of the Afghan War, and this is where the old title becomes newly useful. In the years after the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, many observers assumed the relationship between Pakistan and the United States would simply cool into routine distance. There were reasons to think so. The great crisis that had tied them together for 2 decades was over. American attention had shifted toward competition with China, the war in Ukraine, energy security, and the broader question of how to manage a world that looked more disorderly and less obedient than the one Washington had expected after the Cold War. Pakistan, meanwhile, was struggling with inflation, debt, political upheaval, militant violence, and the challenge of maintaining strategic relevance in a region where every neighboring frontier seemed to produce risk. It would have been easy, at least in theory, for each country to drift into a less consequential relationship. But history had trained both of them too thoroughly for that. Geography had not changed. Iran was still next door to Pakistan. Afghanistan was still unstable. China was still deeply invested in Pakistan. The Gulf still mattered. India still mattered. Nuclear risk still mattered. And so, even after Afghanistan ceased to dominate every meeting, the old pattern survived in a new register. Pakistan no longer looked like America's great frontline state in the way it had during the anti-Soviet jihad or the first decade after the 9th of November. Instead, it began to look valuable for a different reason, not because it could serve as a simple base for US military designs, but because it could still talk to actors that Washington needed to influence and could not easily command. This new phase became most visible in 2026 through the crisis surrounding the United States, Iran, and the broader Middle East war environment. The language of direct alliance was not the language that mattered most here. The more revealing language was mediation, access, channel, and intermediary. Pakistan was not being publicly advertised as the instrument through which the United States would wage a straightforward war against Iran, China, or Russia. The reality was more subtle and therefore more historically interesting. Pakistan was being treated as a state whose geography, military leadership, and diplomatic positioning made it useful to Washington at a moment when Washington needed options. That is the classic logic of the alliance of convenience, translated into a new century. Pakistan's importance lay not in acting as a simple subordinate, but in being able to stand in several rooms at once, to maintain a border with Iran, to speak to Gulf monarchies, to keep lines open to Turkey, to preserve its ties with China, to remain intelligible to Washington, and to do so without publicly presenting itself as anyone's servant. If one asks why Pakistan suddenly looked relevant again, the answer is not sentiment. It is structure. The immediate contemporary trigger was the war and ceasefire environment around Iran in early 2026. After US-Israeli strikes on Iran beginning in late February and the subsequent cycle of retaliation, blockade pressure, and negotiations over whether there would be a wider settlement, the United States found itself in a familiar strategic bind. It could use force. It could intensify sanctions and maritime pressure. It could rely on its Gulf partners and on Israel. But it also needed channels, states that could move messages, test conditions, assess seriousness, and provide an arena for indirect contact without requiring immediate public concessions by either side. Oman has long played this role in parts of the region. Qatar has at times played it. But in 2026 Pakistan moved decisively back into view. Reuters described Pakistan as having become a trusted regional partner and a mediator between the United States and Iran, a remarkable turnaround from its more isolated position not long before. That turnaround was not accidental. It was being driven in large part by the reassertion of Pakistan's military leadership as the most consistent external face of the state, above all through Field Marshal Asim Munir. Asim Munir's role matters because the current reset does not make sense if one thinks of U.S. Pakistan relations purely through civilian diplomacy. For decades the military has been the institution through which the deepest, hardest, and most secretive forms of cooperation survived. That pattern had never disappeared. In the newer phase it simply became less disguised. Reuters and other reporting indicated that Munir had rebuilt trust in Washington through a combination of security cooperation, personal diplomacy, and his management of regional tension. One key turning point was Pakistan's role in helping capture a suspect tied to the 2021 Kabul airport bombing. For an American political system that still carries the memory of the chaotic Afghanistan exit as a wound, this mattered symbolically as well as operationally. Pakistan could once again present itself not merely as a problem inherited from the war on terror, but as a state capable of delivering something tangible that Washington still cared about. Add to this the perception that Pakistan's military leadership had shown restraint during recent confrontation with India, and the diplomatic image of Pakistan in Washington improved. It did not become idealized. It became useful in a way that fit current US needs. That is also why Donald Trump's treatment of Pakistan in this phase should not be misunderstood. He was not restoring the old alliance in its mid-Cold War or post-9/11 sense. He was politically elevating Pakistan because it suited a specific strategic moment. Reports that Trump and his team were in close contact with Munir, and that Trump had spoken warmly of him, do not mean Pakistan had become America's intimate long-term partner in some transformed moral sense. They mean that Trump, like other American leaders before him, recognized that Pakistan could be an asset when the regional board became too complicated for direct force alone. Trump's style tends to make such choices appear personal, improvisational, and dramatic. But the deeper logic is older than him. Whenever the United States needs a Muslim-majority state with military seriousness, intelligence experience, regional contacts, a border touching Iran, a working relationship with Beijing, credibility in Riyadh and Ankara, and enough domestic weight to absorb the risks of mediation, Pakistan reappears on the shortlist. In that sense, Trump is not inventing a new relationship. He is activating an old one under new conditions. The Iran chapter is particularly revealing because it corrects a simplistic misconception. The story is not that Washington is using Pakistan to fight Iran in some clean, direct way. A cleaner historical phrasing would be this: Washington is using Pakistan as a regional broker in an environment shaped by confrontation with Iran, concern about China, awareness of Russia's role, and a desire to keep escalation controlled. Pakistan's usefulness comes from being able to mediate, pressure indirectly, and help create channels in a crisis where military action alone cannot secure a durable outcome. Reuters reported that Pakistan had offered to host U.S.Iran talks and had positioned itself as a key channel precisely because of assets no other mediator combines in quite the same way: a border with Iran, a large Shiite population that makes the politics of Iran impossible to treat as purely external, defense ties with Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and working strategic ties with both Washington and Beijing. This is not the same as fighting America's war. It is something more ambiguous and arguably more characteristic of Pakistan's whole post-1947 history, becoming useful at the edge of someone else's conflict while trying to convert that usefulness into status, leverage, and insulation for itself. That logic has a long precedent in the relationship. In the 1950s, Pakistan joined US-backed alliances because it believed global anti-communism could be translated into local security. In the 1980s, it made itself indispensable in Afghanistan because anti-Soviet cooperation could be translated into money, arms, and strategic centrality. After the 9th of November, it became the hinge of the American war in Afghanistan because counterterrorism could be translated into restored military and diplomatic relevance. In 2026, the mechanism is subtler but the structure is the same. Pakistan is trying to convert diplomatic usefulness into broader strategic rehabilitation. The United States is trying to convert Pakistan's access into regional advantage without promising more than it wants to give. The alliance of convenience is alive because both sides still understand that exchange. The modern Iran chapter also reveals how Pakistan's ties to China alter rather than eliminate its usefulness to Washington. For years, many analysts assumed that as Pakistan moved deeper into China's orbit through the China-Pakistan economic corridor and broader strategic dependence, its value to the United States would decline sharply. But a state does not lose all value simply because it is close to another great power. Sometimes its value increases precisely because it can speak in more than one direction. Pakistan is not a Chinese proxy in the crude sense, and that is part of why it matters. It can engage Beijing without being absorbed by it. It can discuss US concerns without becoming a US satellite. That balancing act is unstable and often awkward, but it makes Pakistan a useful diplomatic hinge in moments when Washington wants a regional channel that is not fully inside a single bloc. Iranian diplomacy in 2026 underscored this point. Tehran's foreign minister moved through Pakistan, Oman, and Russia, among other stops, as part of the effort to shape negotiations after the ceasefire and to resist an American sequencing in which nuclear issues would be addressed on Washington's terms first. Here Pakistan's role becomes especially clear. It was not replacing Oman or Russia, it was becoming part of a chain. It was one of the few states able to host, relay, and frame messages without immediately discrediting itself to either side. Pakistan's military leadership had enough credibility in Washington to be heard, enough strategic seriousness to be taken seriously by Tehran, and enough regional embeddedness to avoid looking like an artificial venue. That is what mediator means in this context. Not neutrality in the moral sense. Not purity. But utility as a channel that both sides believe may still carry messages more effectively than open confrontation. Why was Pakistan picked over other possible channels? The reasons are practical rather than romantic. First, it borders Iran. That alone matters. States that share borders do not speak about one another in purely theoretical language. Smuggling, sectarian spillover, refugee flows, energy routes, military anxieties, and domestic political consequences make Iran real to Pakistan in a way that it is not real to more distant mediators. Second, Pakistan has a substantial Shiite population and therefore cannot approach Iran as a distant, monolithic adversary without implicating its own social fabric. Third, Pakistan's army and political class maintain meaningful relations with Saudi Arabia and Turkey, giving Islamabad a broader Sunni world diplomatic connectivity that can still coexist with direct channels to Tehran. Fourth, Pakistan remains one of the few states that can speak to the United States while also maintaining serious ties with China, and that gives its mediation a multipolar credibility that purely pro-US actors may lack. Fifth, Pakistan's strategic institutions are accustomed to secrecy, risk, and layered messaging. In a crisis where indirect negotiation matters, those habits are assets. Trump's decision to add Pakistan more visibly into the negotiation environment therefore makes sense once one strips away the emotional noise. He is not rewarding Pakistan because the two countries have suddenly discovered a common philosophy of world order. He is choosing Pakistan because it is useful in a specific regional crisis where force, pressure, and diplomacy all have to operate together. Pakistan can help manage the space between maximal confrontation and total breakdown. It can host. It can relay. It can pressure. It can test whether messages are serious. It can offer political cover for indirect contact. And because the relationship between Trump and Munir appears warmer than the relationship between Washington and many earlier Pakistani power centers, the channel has become easier to activate. This is not a sentimental alliance. It is a functional one. At the same time, Pakistan's role is constrained by the very factors that make it useful. Mediation is not cost-free. Iran will not trust Pakistan infinitely, especially if it suspects Islamabad is leaning too far toward Washington or Riyadh. Pakistan's domestic politics are not immune to anti-American sentiment, nor are they immune to criticism from groups that see proximity to the United States as dangerous or humiliating. China will watch carefully to ensure that Pakistani usefulness to Washington does not mutate into alignment against Beijing. Russia, too, will read Pakistan's role through the larger geometry of a changing Eurasia. This means that Pakistan's current value lies precisely in remaining somewhat ambiguous. If it were to become too openly identified as America's anti-Iran instrument, it would lose much of its mediating leverage. If it moved too far toward Tehran's position, it would lose American trust. The whole point is that Pakistan sits in the gray zone where it can still speak to both sides without becoming the property of either one. This is why the current chapter belongs in the larger historical story. It shows that the alliance of convenience did not end with the end of the war on terror. It adapted. The instruments changed. Less talk now of a grand anti-communist alliance or a global war on terror. More talk of critical minerals, trade, energy, investment, and selective counter-terrorism cooperation. More emphasis on regional brokering than on overt military partnership. But underneath the softer official language lies the old relationship logic. Pakistan is still most valuable to Washington when a crisis makes its geography, institutions, and relationships difficult to ignore. Washington is still most useful to Pakistan when Pakistan wants leverage, rehabilitation, or strategic relevance in a regional environment that keeps producing danger. The present is therefore not a new story. It is a new variation on the old one. The February 2026 meeting between Secretary Rubio and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif illustrates this shift in vocabulary without erasing the deeper continuity. Officially, the conversation emphasized critical minerals, energy development, commercial investment, and counterterrorism. That language is important. It signals a desire to move beyond a relationship defined only by war. But such meetings do not occur in a vacuum. They happen in a strategic environment in which Pakistan's current utility as a regional intermediary already shadows the agenda. The old military channels and the new economic language are not separate universes. They are part of the same effort to redefine partnership without pretending history has been forgotten. And history has not been forgotten. Pakistan still remembers Presla, drones, Abbottabad, and the repeated sensation that America arrives with urgency and departs with conditions. The United States still remembers militant safe havens, strategic hedging, and years of costly war fought alongside a partner that it often believed was preserving options against it. These memories do not vanish because a new diplomatic opening appears. They shape how every new opening is interpreted. That is why the current phase remains so characteristic of the alliance of convenience. There is movement, contact, and opportunity. There is also caution, selective disclosure, and the assumption on both sides that the other is pursuing more than it publicly says. If one asks what this means for the current war environment between the United States and Iran, the answer is not that Pakistan has become the engine of peace or the hidden general staff of Washington's campaign. It is that Pakistan has become one of the crucial spaces in which escalation is translated into negotiation and negotiation is translated back into pressure. It is a hinge, not a master. It is useful because it can help prevent total diplomatic collapse while still speaking the language of regional realism. That is exactly the kind of role a state acquires when it has spent decades learning how to survive between stronger powers. It also means that the alliance of convenience may prove more durable in this quieter, broker-centered form than it was in some of its louder earlier phases. A relationship built only around war burns hot and leaves bitterness fast. A relationship built around mediation, energy, selective security cooperation, and crisis brokerage may be cooler but more sustainable. That does not make it morally cleaner. It makes it structurally harder to dismiss. Pakistan is not central to every American problem. But in the arc stretching from Iran to Afghanistan, from the Gulf to Western China, it remains one of the few states that can still step into the conversation when others either cannot or will not. And perhaps that is the most revealing contemporary lesson. Donald Trump did not revive Pakistan because he forgot the old grievances. He revived Pakistan because the old pattern still works. When America needs a serious regional state with military coherence, border proximity to Iran, channels to the Gulf, contact with Beijing, and a leadership willing to bargain hard rather than posture sentimentally, Pakistan becomes relevant again. Not beloved. Relevant. And in the history of this relationship, relevance has always mattered more than affection. That is why the modern chapter belongs at the end of the story. It proves that the title still holds. Pakistan and the United States remain linked not because they solved the past, but because the next crisis keeps discovering a use for them.